Well, welcome everyone to the virtual Molt Search training tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. If we would please stay unmuted, so that way if your dog barks in the background, everyone doesn't have to hear it. That said, I apologize ahead of time. My children will be going to bed while we're talking. So if you hear my children, apologies ahead of time. And then it's okay to keep your videos on. It's actually kind of nice to see people's faces as we're talking, and making sure everyone is tracking. And then if you want to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat, or on your Zoom bar, there's a raise hand icon. If you would do that, that'll bring your picture to the top of the queue for us, and then we can answer. Then you can go ahead and unmute and ask your questions. And we'll have a couple times throughout the training to ask questions, and we oftentimes get a lot of great questions. So those are the two ways: either raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of your questions tonight. And as Cheryl said, we are recording this, and we'll send out this recording to you all after we get it from Zoom. That way, if you want to go back and look at it, then you have the ability to do so. You're like, oh, what was that one thing that they said? You can go back and do that. So, Cheryl, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Cheryl Lovato-Niles. I'm the Water Resources Educator with WCU Extension in Whatcom County.
And I am Jonathan Robinson with WCU Extension in Snohomish County, and I run the Beach Watchers program here in Snohomish County. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So tonight, the agenda tonight is we'll cover some background of the European green crab. We'll do a crab molt identification session, and then we'll finish with the Molt Search survey protocol. And full disclosure, Cheryl and I are not European green crab experts, but this training was developed in partnership with the green crab experts at Washington Sea Grant. So we've been working closely with them since this program started. And Janet, I already see a question. Go ahead.
Yes, will we get a copy of the slides?
No, unfortunately not, but you'll have a copy of the recording. So, all right, so with that, we're going to jump into the background on European green crab. So what are they? Where did they come from? And why are we worried about it? And then we'll touch briefly on what's being done about it. So the European green crab has a long history as a damaging invasive species around the globe. That said, it's quite a recent arrival to Washington's inland shorelines. So as the name suggests, European green crab's native range is in northeastern Atlantic Ocean, highlighted here in blue. From there, the green crabs have established populations along nearly every temperate marine coastline worldwide. And the solid lines show where there's primary invasions, and then the dotted lines show secondary invasions where the green crabs have stepstoned from one shoreline, from one invasive area to another invasive area, to a new place. And so there's a variety of reasons why green crabs are so successful. In fact, the International Panel for Invasive Species categorizes them as one of the world's 10 worst invasive species. And so there's some really good reasons for why they are so successful at invading new shorelines. The first is they're very small. So in their free-floating planktonic stage, both the zoea stage and the megalope stage are really, really small, microscopic, basically impossible to see with the naked eye. And because of that, it's very easy for them to hitchhike in ballast water of ships, transferring of shellfish material like mussels, or with seaweed material that's used as packing material for different types of seafood or live bait worms. The second reason they're so successful as an invasive species is that they're very prolific. So the picture here shows a gravid female with her clutch of eggs. And in the chat, I would like you to put how many eggs you think one female has in one clutch. So you see, I'm answering 1,000,000, 1,500, 60,000, 10,000. All right, yeah, as you can see by the size of the eggs here in the picture, there appears to be a lot of them. So one female can produce as many as 250,000 eggs in one clutch. And the research shows that in our region, females can produce multiple clutches per year from a single mating event, and they can also reach reproductive size very quickly. So one female can almost produce 1,000,000 eggs in a year's time, which is quite remarkable. And then the third reason they are such successful invaders is that they are generalists, meaning they can eat a very broad diet and are capable of eating and subsisting nearly anything they can get their claws on. So they prefer to be predators and eat a lot of the same foods that we do, as you see on this list. It's shellfish, clams, oysters. But they can prey on a wide variety of other items like polychaete worms, barnacles, small crabs. Then not only that, they can not only survive, but reproduce on an entirely vegetarian diet, which is also quite remarkable. So basically anything they can get their claws on in where they settle in land, excuse me, then they have something to eat, basically. And then the fourth reason is they are very tolerant of a wide range of environmental conditions. So seen here on this bar, the green crab thermal tolerance is the black bar. And then for reference, the Dungeness crab's thermal tolerance is the white bar. So as you can see, European green crabs can tolerate basically from freezing up to 35 degrees Celsius, whereas Dungeness crab are only really happy between 3 and 18 degrees Celsius. And then for salinity, Dungeness crab, or excuse me, European green crab can also tolerate a very wide range of salinities, down to 5 parts per thousand, which is almost freshwater, up to full ocean conditions, whereas Dungeness crab can only tolerate pretty much seawater, from 31 to 34 parts per thousand. And because of that reason, European green crab thrive in estuaries where the rivers meet the sea, kind of where you have that mixing of fresh and salt water. And it just so happens this is where a lot of shipping occurs and where most of our ports are worldwide. Thus, they are much more likely to be picked up and transported around the world. So those are the 5 main reasons of why they are such successful invaders. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to talk about abundance, what's at risk.
Thanks, Jonathan. Did my screen share work all right?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so what is at risk? Why are we worried about this? So they're worried about it because of the densities that they're able to reach, and that's the real driver of the potential ecological impacts. So the illustration on the left shows some of the features of the vibrant Salish Sea estuaries that we know and love. And as predators, green crabs are able to eat up a lot of our shellfish. They can also compete with and even consume some native crab species, such as Dungeness and short crabs. In other parts of the world, they've damaged eelgrass beds by ripping up roots while they're digging and also by just plain eating it. Dense populations might destabilize shorelines through their burrowing activities. And then, of course, all of those impacts then ripple up and negatively impact animals like salmon and crabs that rely on that eelgrass nursery habitat, the birds that forage on eelgrass and invertebrates, and then, of course, us humans who rely on these resources as well, and also just enjoy the overall ecology of our shorelines. So many of these impacts have been observed in places where green crabs have become abundant. So the arrival of the European green crab on the West Coast is quite recent. It was first found in 1989 in San Francisco Bay. Evidence suggests that they probably got there with seaweed packing material that came from the northern New England states. Then over the next decade, the free-swimming larvae rode ocean currents and spread northward up the coast. Warm climatic events such as El Niños and blobs have aided them. And over time, they've continued to spread northward. And initially, they skipped over the Salish Sea and didn't immediately get established along coastal Washington either. And it was thought that we were being somewhat protected by the high volume of surface flow that comes out of the Salish Sea. And it's thought that that kept the green crab, they kept them swept out of these waters, but that didn't last. In 2012, they were first found in a small embayment just west of Victoria. And then in 2016, the first green crab was discovered on San Juan Island by a trained volunteer working with a program called Crab Team, which we'll mention a little bit later in the presentation. Again, that's a team coordinated by Washington Sea Grant, whom we should mention is our partner on this Molt Search program. The following year, the first hotspot, meaning an area of higher density, was detected at Dungeness Spit. In 2019, there was substantial spread in Whatcom, up here where I am, and also in Skagit County. All of this pointing to the early stages of an accelerating invasion. And then more recently in 2022, we found the first populations in Hood Canal beginning to establish. So what is being done about it? The good news is a lot. There is actually a huge network of entities who are working on this, and that includes nonprofits, tribes, federal partners, all working with state agencies to manage the European green crab populations and also to look for evidence of their spread to new areas. And if you want more information on the details of what all is being done, there's a lot that you can find on the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's European Green Crab Hub. So the big picture is well, the big picture here, the black dots show places where people have surveyed for the green crab and have not found anything. The green dots show places where people have surveyed and they have found European green crab, and the size of the green dot indicates the size of the population that was found. So generally speaking, it still remains rare in our inland Washington shorelines, though populations are growing and spreading statewide. And we are working to try to slow this early stage of the invasion. And Washington State has responded very strongly. So Governor Inslee declared an emergency related to green crab in 2022, and that means that there's a fair amount of state resources being dedicated to this effort. So our strategy in Washington State is early detection and rapid response. And one way that early detection work is being done is through live trapping. So this is a very effective method if the European green crabs are close enough to smell the bait. And there are many crab team volunteers involved in this effort. It is, however, very time and labor intensive to do this. Another way to do early detection work is to look for their molts, the shed shells that crabs, the shells that crabs shed when they grow and that we find on the beaches. And that's where Molt Search comes in. There we go. And that Molt Search, these Molt Searches can be done in just 20 minutes, less than that if you're working with a friend or friends. And they can be done any place where you have safe and legal access to the shoreline. It involves conducting a semi-systematic survey for the molted shells of green crab and then submitting your findings using this free app called MyCoast, which you can download to your mobile phone, or you can submit it through the MyCoast website, as Jonathan mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So the rest of this presentation is going to be about how to identify the European green crab and how to conduct a molt search. Are there any questions so far?
Hey, seeing none, I will jump in now and share my screen.
And if questions come up for you while Jonathan is presenting, you can enter them into the chat if you wish. Yep.
Excellent. All right, so now time for some fun ID, crab molt ID. So the goal of this portion of the training is to not only teach you how to identify a European green crab, but to give you some practice helping distinguish them from some commonly encountered native crab species. So before we do that, though, we are going to highlight some crab anatomy, some crab biology. So that way, tomorrow you can impress all of your friends about these crab biology terms. So in the chat, does anyone know what the back hard part of the shell is called? Fantastic. Yes, it is called a carapace. Well done, everyone. Okay, and then up next, we have the points on the outside edge of the carapace, which we call marginal teeth or marginal spines. And then we have the eye stalks, usually located in the middle and the front part of the carapace, kind of the face. And then the bump between the two eye stalks is called the rostrum. And oftentimes crabs are identified based on the shape of the rostrum. And then being a decapod, we have 8 hind walking legs. And then can anyone tell me what the scientific term for the front 2 walking or the front 2 appendages of the crab is called? Besides claws. Pinchers, good guess. That's a tough one. So chilliped is the correct answer. So that's claw is totally fine. But if you want to, impress your friends as you're walking down the beach and be like, check out that cool chilliped down there. So take that with you and do as you will. So those are the main ways, and what we'll be talking about of how to distinguish green crab and how to identify crab species from one another. All right, so when DFNW, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, first put out a call for, they kind of knew that European green crab was a problem. They said, all right, send us people, to the general public, send us your green crabs. And unfortunately, there is a huge case of mistaken identity because a lot of our native crabs in the Puget Sound look green, hence the name why we kind of emphasize the European part of the green crab name. And also, a lot of European green crabs don't look green. And so these are all pictures of European green crabs with a whole variety of patterns and colors on their carapace. Like this big picture, it looks almost red. We got black, white, spotted, a whole bunch of patterns. So first misnomer is European green crabs are oftentimes not green. Then combine that with the fact that we oftentimes, since we're looking for molts as they wash up on the beach and bake in the sun, oftentimes lose their color. And so color is not a great way to identify European green crabs. So then not only that, but as I alluded to just a minute ago, is that there's a lot of native crab species that are bright green and look green. And some of them look a little weird, like this individual here. People are like, I don't know, I've never seen that crab before. That's got to be the invasive green crab. So there's been a huge case of mistaken identity with the European green crab. That said, fortunately for us, the European green crab has some key identifying factors. And once you know what to look for, there's not any other species of crab in the Puget Sound, native crabs in the Puget Sound, that are similar to it. So here's a picture of a European green crab. At its biggest, it is about 10 centimeters across, or 4 inches. That's the biggest that European green crabs ever get. So much smaller than your keeper-sized Dungeness crab. And then so if we look at the eye spots here, identify where the eye stalks are. The main way to identify a European green crab is to go from the eye to the outer edge and count their the spines or marginal teeth. And green crabs have 5. So what I like to show people is that green has 5 letters in it. So green crab, that, or European green crab, 5 marginal teeth on either side of their head. So if you take away nothing else from this training, if you take away this, then we will have done our job. So there's a couple other characteristics, but that is the main way. There's no other species of crab in the Puget Sound that has those 5 marginal teeth. And then also another identifying characteristic of the European green crab is the shape of their carapace, which is vaguely jewel-shaped. And we can compare and contrast that with other species. So again, here's a couple different pictures to kind of orient you. So again, this carapace of the European green crab is not really green, it's reddish, but those 5 spines are unmistakable from once you find the eye to the outside edge. Then another feature is they have 3 even bumps between their 2 eye stalks on their rostrum. But those 5 spines are kind of the key takeaway for identifying European green crab. So all right, here I have a picture of a molt drawer that Washington Sea Grant team puts together for training purposes. And which of these crab carapaces is a European green crab? European green crab. Go ahead and put that letter in the chat. Good work, everyone. You're well on your way to being an expert in identifying European green crabs. Yes, you are all correct. The letter C is the European green crab molt carapace in this picture. All right, so now what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of highlight some of the common native crab species that we have in the Puget Sound and the Salish Sea, and compare and contrast with the green crab and the identifying features. So first up, we have the native shore crabs, both the purple shore crab and the hairy shore crab, the Hermagapsis species. And the key characteristic for the shore crabs is they have 3 marginal teeth outside of their eye, compared to the green crab's 5. And then their shape of their carapace is very square shaped in reference to that jewel shaped European green crab carapace. All right, so which of the letters are our native shore crabs? This one's a little more challenging. My apologies for the picture quality. Sometimes I get it wrong, just blame it on the photograph quality. But a lot of your crabs, so it's A and B are our native shore crabs, both the purple shore crab and the hairy shore crab. Next up, we have the native kelp crab or spider crabs. So again, if you look for where the eyes are on our native kelp and spider crab, so either side right here, their eye stalks, they have a very pronounced rostrum. And their carapace is almost kind of plus-shaped or cross-shaped, where it's longer than it is wide. And compare and contrast to that to the European green crab, whose carapace is wider than it is long. All right, so next quiz: which carapace is our kelp or spider crabs? And the correct answer is E, right here. Spider crabs also, as note, can be bright green. They like to hang out on stalks of kelp underwater and chow down on them. And so they get, some of them get this like bright green color. So this was one of the species of mistaken identity, unfortunately. And then next up, our native hairy helmet crab, which probably had the highest case of mistaken identity with green crab because they look a little weird. So they have 6 marginal teeth, so the closest number of any of our native crabs in the Puget Sound to the European green crab. But of note, if you compare and contrast the hairy helmet crab to our European green crab, the hairy helmet crab has some marginal teeth on past the outside edge, the widest point of their carapace, so back here, whereas the European green crab is smooth all the way to the back of its carapace. So if you see marginal teeth behind the outside, the widest part of the carapace, then it's probably a hairy helmet crab. And then if you look at the top of the carapace, it's covered in bumps, hence the name hairy helmet crab. So these guys have a bunch of hairs all over them. So that's kind of another key factor. And then if you look at the shape of the carapace, it's kind of like diamond shaped-ish compared to the jewel shape of the European green crab. So kind of some different shapes to the carapace, or I guess helmet shaped might be more appropriate, hence the name, the hairy helmet crab. And these are not as common. So this one got the highest case of mistaken identity, unfortunately. All right, so next pop quiz. Which letter is our hairy helmet crab? Fantastic. Yep, you all are correct. We're getting to process of elimination. D is the hairy helmet crab. Okay. Now moving on to a not as common crab, but still gets misidentified for a European green crab, the black-clawed crab. So it has a similar carapace shape to our European green crab. That said, it has 3 marginal teeth from the eye outside. And sometimes it can get mistaken. This looks like it's a European green crab shell that gets like worn down over time, where the marginal teeth kind of like rubbed off. That doesn't really happen with crab molts. They don't last in the environment long enough to be kind of worn down and eroded away. They're pretty fragile, so they usually shatter before they like break into pieces before they get eroded down. So looking for those 3 outer marginal teeth. And then they also have black tips on their claws. And some European green crabs can have darker coloration on the tips of their claws. So that's another, but it's usually bluish rather than the black clawed crab, which has black claws, or black chilipeds. All right, so pop quiz time. Which of these carapaces is a black-clawed crab? This is a tough one. And it's a tough one because it is a trick question. If you couldn't find it, you are correct. There is not a black-clawed crab carapace in the box. So sorry for the trick question, everyone. And then last but not least, our native cancer crabs. These all have some key similar identifying characteristics. And there's some distinguishing, they're easy to distinguish from the European green crab. So first, they have an oval-shaped shell, oval-shaped carapace, excuse me. And then they all have 10 marginal teeth from the eye to the outside edge. So again, comparing and contrast each of these species. So Dungeness crab, our beloved Dungeness crab, 10 marginal teeth or spines from the eye to the outside edge. These spines are really sharp, kind of like needle-like, especially if the carapace is smaller. And they have that classic reddish brown to purple color on their back of their carapace. And then white tips their claws, and then their claws have serrations on their outer edge. And the 10th tooth for the Dungeness crab is the widest. And so we compare and contrast the Dungeness crab to the graceful crab, which they look very, very similar, and it's easy to misidentify the two of them. That said, if you look closely at the outside tooth, again, like I said, the Dungeness crab, their 10th tooth is the widest point of their shell, whereas the graceful crab, this is the 9th tooth. Their 10th tooth is actually behind it on the back of their shell. So and being involved with this Molt Search program, I have since learned and been taught how to identify a graceful crab, especially if it's really small. If it's a small molt, it can be really hard to see. So if you take your finger from the outside tooth and run it back along the edge, if it catches, then you have a graceful crab carapace. If it doesn't catch and it's smooth all the way back, it's a Dungeness crab, because sometimes it can be really hard to count the 10 tiny teeth all the way, or 9 all the way around. So run your fingernail back if it catches, graceful crab. If it doesn't, it's a Dungeness crab. And then another way to distinguish between the two is that Dungeness crab have those serrations, and graceful crabs have a smooth edge to the outside of their chillip head or their claw. Sometimes you don't always have the claw to look at, but if you do have the claw, that's another dead giveaway, the way to distinguish between our Dungeness crab and the graceful crab. Okay, then moving on to our red rock crab, Cancer productus, and the lesser known and not as common, but still popular pygmy rock crab. So the red rock crabs, our main way to tell them is the black tips on their claws. And then the best way to distinguish between red rock crabs and Dungeness crabs is looking at those marginal teeth. The red rock crab's marginal teeth are much like rounder and flatter, and the Dungeness crabs are much more needle-like, like almost sharp to touch. So that's the best way to distinguish between those two species that can get misidentified and easily interchanged. The red rock crab also tends to have a much more reddish carapace, but it's when they're juvenile, they have some crazy patterns like zebra stripes and all sorts of crazy colorations. So if you see a smaller carapace with like some really weird patterning that has 10 marginal teeth, it's probably a red rock crab. All right, so last pop quiz. Which of the letters is which? Which one is the Dungeness crab? Which one is the red rock crab? And which one is the graceful crab? And again, you can blame, if you get it wrong, on the quality of the photograph. So my apologies for the photograph quality. It's not the best, or the best way, or the easiest way to identify these species looking at a photograph. Hey. So G is the red rock crab, F is the graceful crab, and then H is the Dungeness crab. So give yourselves a pat on the back if you got them right. And if you got them wrong, just blame it on the photo quality. All right, with that, any questions about crab ID before I pass it back to Cheryl?
Jonathan, there was a question in the chat earlier. I don't recall who asked it now, but someone asked whether or not green crabs are good to eat. And I can start the answer and you can fill in. So they are very small, and apparently in some places they are used as like a stock. But in Washington State, it's illegal to possess live European green crabs. I believe that the intention is to avoid people accidentally spreading them and introducing them to new places.
Yeah, they're not big enough to get a lot of, if you were able to capture them and eat them, like a lot of other places in the world, they have like these hunting derbies for invasive species, like in the Caribbean with lionfish. But unfortunately, it will be a lot of work to open and crack open and have like maybe a bite or two of crab meat. So yeah, that question has come up quite a bit. Like, how can we just like eat them and like eat our way through the invasion and get rid of them that way? But yes, that's in other places of the world they do get used as or in a tripino. I've heard them like it's a whole crab goes in the soup. So, well, okay.
Any other questions about ID? Anatomy? All right, well, I will, seeing none, I will go ahead and take over and talk to you a little bit about the Molt Search protocol. All right, can you see my screen? Everybody sees my screen all right? Excellent. Okay, so now you know a little bit about the background and why we're worried about it and what you're looking for. And now the next is we're going to cover the basics of how to do a molt search. So it is a semi-systematic survey, and the basic outline is that you spend 20 minutes looking for and collecting crustacean molts. Then you identify what you've collected to the best of your ability. You submit a photo of your collection either through the app or through the MyCoast website. And then additional information, if you found any green crab molts, then you're asked to input some additional information on those. And also you have the option of submitting some data on any Dungeness crab molts that you may have found as well, because it turns out that even though our Dungeness crabs have VIP status as adults, we don't actually know a lot about them in their juvenile life stages. And so part of this program also offers or invites data collection on Dungeness crabs as well. But basically, the Molt Search protocol can be broken down into several key features. It's a simple 4-step survey protocol that you can do anytime on any Salish Sea shoreline where you have safe and legal access. And then again, you submit it through that app or online through that website. So step 1 is prepare. So you want to choose a location, again, where you have safe and legal access. It's important that we're not trespassing. And you want to gather your tools. So you want to have some kind of a device that you can use to take photos. For most of you, that's going to be your phone, but it could be your camera. You'll want to have a collection container, 1 collection container per person. So a baggie, a bucket, a takeout container, a clean takeout container, anything will work. A measuring device. Calipers work great, and if you attend an in-person training, many of our co-leads have been providing these utility calipers to folks for free. We got them from Harbor Freight for about $2. So it's also something that very inexpensive. You could pick it up yourself very affordably. If you don't have the calipers, you can use a ruler and the Molt Search ID guide. And again, if you go to an in-person training, we're able to hand those out to folks, but this is also available online. So that Sea Grant website that maybe the Molt Search website that many of you probably use to register for this event would be a place, that's where you would find the ID guides. So you can either download those and print them out, bring them with you to the beach, or you can access them from your phone while you're doing the Molt Search. Okay, step 2 is conduct your survey. So Molt Searches should be fully focused on the areas of the shoreline where you would expect to find the most molts. So in this picture here, I've labeled 4 different sections of the beach. We've got A, that area A is right along the water's edge, but what I'm pointing out there is an area of seaweed that's washed up. In this case, it's eelgrass. B is an area of clear beach. C is another area where seaweed has piled up, what's called the rack line, and then D is the upper beach above that. And I want you to put in the chat where you think you might find molts. Also seeing some comments. Were there some questions that came through in the chat?
Yeah, sure. There's one about asked ID all crabs, which I was able to answer, and then Jessica shared a link that with me that I will pass that along from an NPR article, news story from a year or two ago.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay, great. Yeah, so Jonathan, I didn't read his comment, but the only thing you really need to be able to do is to identify the European green crab. If you can confidently identify the European green crab and distinguish that from the native crabs, you have everything you need to do in order to participate in Molt Search. With that said, being able to identify all of them is helpful, but again, it's not essential. Okay, so for those of you who said A and C, yes, those rackline areas where the eelgrass has collected, where the seaweed has collected, those are the most promising places to look for molts. So again, they float in, they're deposited with other floating materials as the tide recedes. So places where that wood is being deposited, where the eelgrass is being deposited, that's where those molts are likely to be deposited as well. And then, so beaches will have one or more rack lines, and also you can look on the base of grasses or shrubbery or the base of logs. If you're in a marshy area, the rack line might be along the edge of grass or shrubbery. So you're looking for places where things collect. Okay, so before you start, this is an idealized or an abstract shoreline here, this graphic. So before you start, what you want to do is if you're working alone or if you're working with friends, you want to first scan, regardless of if you're working alone or with friends, you first want to scan the shoreline and think, where are things collecting? And then you'll begin a timed hunt. If you're working with friends, you'll say, okay, you handle this lower rack line, I'll handle this upper rack line. If you can go check the logs and the bases of the base of the grasses, and then you set a timer so that you don't lose track of yourselves. And you collect all the crustaceans you find. That's where that collection bag or bucket or bin comes in handy. So you just spend that time just collecting. You don't stop to identify things, you just collect. It's like an Easter egg hunt. You're just collecting, putting things in the bucket. And all crustaceans are fair game. So little shrimp molts, little tiny things, collect everything that you find at this point. And it's super important to shrink your search image small, to look for and find those small things. So looking for very small things will help make sure that you don't miss any molts that might be from very young and possibly newly arrived green crabs. And then after your timer goes off, then you go through and sort and count the molts. So I mentioned the timer. And so, if you want to do the survey for 20 person minutes, and this is kind of like man hours. So if you're working alone, then you would be searching for 20 minutes. If you're with a friend, you can divide and each search for 10 minutes. If you're working with several friends, you can divvy it up and say 4 friends and each search for 5 minutes. But we do recommend that 4 is the biggest group size. So if you have more than 4 friends who want to do molt searching with you, yay! But we recommend dividing into 2 smaller groups. So then the next step, step 3, is to sort, identify, and photograph what you found. So it's great to first start by sorting things, like even if you can't identify it, if you can see that the shapes are all similar, go ahead and sort them out, right? And then if you can, identify everything that you found. That really helps because you're looking carefully at those features. You're looking carefully at those marginal teeth, those spines. You're looking carefully at the shape. But if all you can do is confidently identify that European green crab and distinguish it from the others, you've got everything you need. And then you're also welcome to enter that to submit data on any Dungeness crab molts that you find as well. So having those separated out when you're doing your sorted will be helpful. Next, you'll take a beautiful overhead photo, and please be sure to add an object for scale. The calipers work great for this, or a ruler, but enter something for scale. That's super helpful. And we also want to make sure you know that staff at Sea Grant double check every submitted photo. So there is a second set of eyes looking over your collection. So that's another reason why we want people to feel confident about participating, even if you don't feel super confident about your IDs. So the photos are super useful. And let's see. And there's some images from the Molt Search, from the MyCoast website, showing some collections, some molt collections. If you find European green crab or are submitting the optional Dungeness molt data, then the app will prompt you to enter how many green crab molts or Dungeness molts you found. And so it's very common to have only part of a crab because molts do get beat up over time and they break. So you'll want to only count it if you have more than half the carapace. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is half a carapace should give you enough information to ID it, even if it's a little tricky, and that way you don't count the same crab twice, right? The app will also ask you whether you found a molt, the shed shell, versus a dead crab versus a live crab. So I think molt versus live crab, pretty easy to tell the difference. A dead crab maybe versus a molt might be a little bit more confusing. A dead crab will tend to be heavier, and it will not be clean. If you can open up the carapace, the shell, there will be stuff in there. Whereas a molt will be very clean looking. There might still be the gills in there, but otherwise there won't be a bunch of stuff in there. And as I'm just glancing over and I see dead will smell in the chat. Yes, and it might smell very bad. Then the app will ask you the sex, and here is a shot of the crabdomen guide, which is on the back side of the ID guide. So females have a wider and more rounded flap than the males, and you can see we've got the two species that we're interested in. We've got the European green crab on the left and the Dungeness on the right. So the females have that wider, more rounded flap. The males have a narrower, more pointy flap. And Jonathan taught me it's beehives versus lighthouses. If you do find European green crabs, the app will ask you for photos and measurements and some additional information for up to 10 molts. So measurements are really helpful because crab size correlates with their age, and that gives people an indication of how long ago they arrived to that location. So you'll be asked to measure the carapace width, which is the widest width of the back shell, including the spines. And for anybody who goes recreational crabbing, you're probably thinking about that notch width, which is how you measure for Dungeness crabs, but this is different. We're asking for the carapace width, which is the widest point, and that's the orange here. And it shows from the very outside to the very outside. And also, I want to let you know that the MyCoast app or the website will prompt you for each piece of information. So you'll have prompts each step of the way. You don't have to remember all this. And next, we're gonna take a look at how we're gonna look at some screenshots in a few minutes. Again, calipers are the ideal tool to use, and you can pick up utility calipers, like I said. There's also a scale at the back on the back of the protocol guide, but be aware that if you print the guide out yourself on your home printer, it might not print at the right size. And for all of the measurements, we're asking folks to round to the nearest millimeter. If you are using these vernier calipers, then you'll read the measurement where the 0 on the vernier scale, that's the slidey part, where it lines up with the main scale above. If you're using a ruler, then it might be a little bit trickier to eyeball where the measurement is, but you'll just want to report that measurement in millimeters. So if you are doing the Dungeness data, the app will ask you for some additional measurements for up to 10 Dungeness molts. It will ask you for both the width at the widest point and also the length, or what you might call the height, the front to back measurement, but it will not ask you for photos of each one. I've seen some activity in the chat. I'm wondering if we should pause here and go over any of the questions that have come in.
Yeah, that's probably a great idea, Cheryl. The question from Jane saying, should we try to go out at low tide, which is around 10:30 on Thursday?
You don't need a very low tide for this. You just need to not be out at a high tide. So you want that rack line exposed, but you don't need a particularly low tide. So anything a mid tide or lower would be fine.
And then Amy asks, one photo for the whole collection or for individuals?
So one photo for the whole collection, and then individual photos if you found any European green crabs. If you found those, then and I'll show you on the screenshots for the app, in the app, then you're going to toggle on, yes, you found European green crab molts, and then the app will prompt you and ask you for photos of each one that you found.
And then there's some questions about what confusion on collecting dead and molt carapaces.
So for the European green crab, if you found a dead one, yes, please do collect that. And we'll talk a little bit about how you deal with that. For anything else though, just the carapaces. So for Dungeness, shore crabs, hairy helmets, we're just interested in the molts. Any other questions that you think we should cover now?
That's all the ones I can see. There's where we get the ID guides, which Tabitha has been great and posted a link to Sea Grant's Molt Search site.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to cover the screenshots of the app, and then we'll have time for some more questions. Okay, so if you have this already downloaded on your phone, feel free to open it up and follow along if you want. So you open it up. It's nice. It has a nice tide chart in the app. And if you do allow it to know your location, it'll give you the tide chart for a location near you. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that you're prompted to select the report type. And so people can submit a lot of different reports through the MyCoast app. So this is Molt Search is one of the newer options. So you'd want to scroll down to find it on the list. If you're using the app and you allow it to know your location, it will automatically put a pin in your exact location and it will automatically note the time. If you do that later, either because you want to do it on your home computer, on the desktop, or because you don't have connectivity or for whatever reason, then you'll need to put a pin in the location where you did your search, and you'll need to manually enter the time as well. And then you will scroll to the bottom and enter molt. What does it say? I have so many things open on my screen here. And you will enter a molt report. There we go. If you didn't find any molts or crabs, it's really helpful to check the box that says no, you didn't find anything. That's actually really helpful data. So if you didn't find anything, don't feel like you were skunked and there's no point in submitting the report. It's still helpful to submit the report. You would just check no, that you didn't find anything. But for our purposes today, let's say yes. Let's imagine that we did find some molts or crabs. So then you'll be prompted to take a photo, either use the app and take the photo or select one from the library. And then you'll click that yellow button at the bottom to continue moving through the form. If you found European green crab molts, then what you'll do is you'll toggle yes to that question. And then from there, it'll prompt you to enter some more information. You'll record the total number that you found, whether it's 2 or 10 or 20, right? And you can see right there in the app, it reminds you to only count it if it's more than 50% of the shell. And then it will also ask you to enter additional photos for each of those molts up to 10. And then it would also prompt you at that point for the carapace width and the sex if you can determine it. If you can't, you would just select uncertain. So if you found Dungeness, if you're doing the Dungeness data and you found more than 10, you're also asked to enter specific information, some measurements for up to 10. And the way that you would take a subsample. So let's say you had 15, but you only need to enter the specific data for up to 10. You'd take a subsample, and what you do is you would lay out those Dungeness molts or those European green crab molts in front of you, close your eyes, and then randomly select 10. And those are the ones that you would take measurements from and or photos and submit that extra information. This is where it'll offer you the opportunity to enter data for the Dungeness Again, it's optional but helpful. If you found any, you would toggle on yes, and then the app would prompt you to enter more information, the total number, and the sex and the size for up to 10. Okay, the final screen that you'll see is a notes and comments screen. So this is where you can add any questions that you might have. Folks at Sea Grant will respond to you via email. They love discussing tricky IDs this way. This is also where you would put in some if you found something that you can't confidently rule out as a green crab, you could put a comment in there. If you found a molt or molt fragment smaller than half a carapace that appears to be green crab, then you would include that in the collection photo and make a note in the comments photo. Any other observations or protocol tweaks that you may have made, it all goes into that comments field. And then you just press submit. If you found a live or a dead green crab, what do you do? If it is dead, you should bring it home if you are allowed, and you want to be sure to check the local rules around collecting on the beach that you're at, because some beaches don't allow you to collect anything. If it is dead, you should bring it home. Please record the sex and the carapace width as you would with any molt, and you will probably be contacted for some more information, possibly some more photographs, possibly more measurements. it will get very stinky. The freezer is a good place to put it. If it is alive, then please take pictures of it from several angles, record the sex, and measure the carapace width to the extent that you're able, and then you must release it. Again, there are cases of mistaken identity. That hairy helmet crab, unfortunately, has been, falsely accused in the past. So you got to release it just in case. And also, again, it's illegal to possess a live European green crab. And then after you're done with your survey, you can dispose of your molts. You can just leave them be. If you're going to be resurveying the same beach, though, you might want to crush them so that you're not resurveying the same molts over and over again. Again, if you found a European green crab molt, one or more, folks will follow up with you after you submit your report. Please do hang on to them if it doesn't run afoul of those local collecting rules, and people may ask you for some more photos and details. And then once your report is confirmed, it gets published to the MyCoast website, and that's where you can see all the other Molt Search reports that are being submitted from around the Salish Sea, as well as a few on the coast. And the result is a map that shows where people are looking. And that shows managers where there are gaps in those efforts and where their limited monitoring resources are best spent. So Molt Search results in way more eyes on the beach, keeping an eye out for the very first sign of European green crab being found in a new area. And we encourage you to survey anywhere, but you can be those eyes on your favorite local shoreline. So the 4 simple steps: prepare, choose your location, gather your tools, conduct your survey. Looks like PowerPoint is renumbering for us, but number 3 is sort, identify, and photograph, measure. And then number 4 is submit your molt survey. And then last slide, and then we'll turn to some more questions. So on June 20th, we are encouraging as many people as can, as many trained volunteers as possible, to get out on our shorelines for our Molt Blitz. That's going to be the longest day of the year. So hopefully that allows for lots of people to get out, even the folks who are working during the day. And we're trying to create the largest single day data set on our local shorelines that we can get. And there are many, many places where there are going to be trained staff people, such as myself, Jonathan, Tabitha here, on the beaches, present and available to answer questions and to help people with IDs should they need it. So here is a list of some of the places where people are going to be. And here's a map that shows where those places are. And you can find that, you can find a full list. Well, this possibly is the full list, I'm not positive, but you can get more details on the Sea Grant Crab Team Molt Search webpage. That's the same, there we go, Jonathan just dropped that link into the chat. So
and apologies, Tabitha, we did not get your dots up in time. So Tabitha's has 2 events if you're around Whidbey Island, live near Whidbey Island, that she has. But the website that I dropped in the chat has the full list of events and times and dates. So check that and we'll find whichever event is closest to you.
I see a few questions. I see one from Jessica. What is the date range where we can do molt searches? You can do molt searches anytime. You can do them year round if you want, but the crabs molt more when the weather is warmer. And so the summertime, the spring, summer into fall, that's the time when you're most likely to find molts. And so you can do them on whatever schedule works for you. It's the times that's the months that are going to be most likely where you're going to find them.
And that goes along with Gordon's question, who asks, do all crab molts at the same time of year? And the simple answer is no. So crabs molt when they are growing, and they are most likely to grow when there's an abundant amount of food and the water is warmer. So between the months of April and September. But that's to say that crabs will not molt sometime in throughout the winter. In fact, there's a lot we don't know about some of our native crab species of how many times they molt. Do they all molt together? Do they molt kind of whenever? Like each individual is different. Even for our Dungeness crab species, we don't know a lot about. And the reason that we included that submitting optional Dungeness crab data is that the Dungeness crab researchers don't know. They know a lot about planktonic Dungeness crabs because they can do plankton tows around the Puget Sound. And they know a lot about full-size keeper Dungeness crabs because they can get the catch data, recreational and commercial catch data. But there's a kind of a black box in between when they first settle to when they grow up to keeper size, and how often they molt, how fast they grow is largely unknown. So the Dungeness crab researchers were super excited to hear that we are collecting data on this kind of black box age range for Dungeness crab. So we're hoping to learn a lot about kind of those crabs. So that said, we don't find as many molts after September, and before April, we don't see as many, but there is a possibility.
I see a question here from Maggie about any where black dots where people had collected or had where European green crabs had been found, and none had been found on the west side of the sound around Seattle. And I think that I don't think really it's fully known. It might be that the habitat, there's not as much suitable habitat around there. It might be just coincidence. Just they haven't gone there yet.
So, and to kind of fill in some of the blanks too, a lot of those black dots are regularly sampled crab team trap sites. And so WC Sea Grant's, Washington Sea Grant's crab team kind of identified the very prime habitats that green crab like to settle in, aka salt marshes. And kind of the top 65 of those around the Salish Sea. And so a lot of those dots are those sites. And so probably one reason there's none kind of around the Seattle area is there's not a lot of salt marsh habitat around the Seattle area. There probably was at one point, but it has since been filled in with concrete. So that's probably why there's not a lot of those permanent measuring spots in the Seattle area.
Another question from Laura Lipman asking whether European green crabs have been found on Vashon Island. And I don't know for sure. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think I don't think any green crabs have been found south of Admiralty Point on Whidbey Island. Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, if you go to they have a green crab hub that has like pretty much not to the day, but weekly update situation reports of where they're catching European green crabs. Most of them are on the coast. The Washington coast is a completely different ball game. If you go out to an estuary on the Washington coast, you'll most likely find a European green crab. They are well established in most of the estuaries on the Washington coast. But in the Puget Sound and the Salish Sea, they're abundant at the Lummi Sea Pens in Whatcom County, and they've been found as far south as Padilla Bay and Fidalgo Bay this year. And there's been a few isolated spottings in the Hood Canal. But to my knowledge, that is as far south in the Puget Sound as they have been spotted. And those are like one or two individuals, not enough to create any large abundances. But the green crab hub with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, if you look at that site, they have kind of weekly updates if you want to know if there are green crab that have been found near you.
I see a question from Janet asking if two people go to the beach, can each do a 20-minute survey in a different part of the beach? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
The more the merrier. Like the more searches you can get done, that is fantastic.
Bill asks about whether the guidebook is called Molt Search Protocol Guide. Molt Search Survey Protocol, yes, indeed. So there will be 2 documents that you can access from that Molt Search site. And one is going to be the ID guide, and the other one is going to be the protocol guide. And so the protocol, if you have questions, you want a refresher, you can look at that. If you can come out to one of the in-person trainings, they might be able to give you a paper handout as well, or one of the supported beaches. I know that for the beaches that I'm going to be at in Whatcom County, I'm going to be on Thursday, I'm going to be at Semiahmoo Spit, and I'm also going to then go to the beach on Gulf Road, beach access on Gulf Road, and I will have some guides with me, some paper copies. If anybody is here from, I know there are a couple people from Whatcom County, so I can hand those out to you there.
And then Richard asks, are biological preserves open to this activity? And I will stress, search anywhere you have safe and legal access to the beach. So for instance, a beach near me in Edmonds is a marine sanctuary. And so you can look for certain molts on those beaches, but all of the material that you collect during the search needs to stay on the beach. It's illegal for you to take any of the carapaces off of the beach. And then oftentimes we get also questions kind of along those lines of like, should I crush up the shells? What do I do with the molts when I'm done with them? And I oftentimes will crumble them and leave the material kind of scattered on the beach. So that way, if someone comes behind me like the following hour and does a search behind me, they won't like find this giant collection of molts and then double count them. Or if you're searching the same beach like kind of every week, if you're lucky enough to have shorefront property, I would recommend crumbling up the molts, and that way when you come back to measure that section of beach, you don't recount the same molts.
Wayne has a question. He's asking, are there any theories yet as to the reason for the nearly complete loss of adult Dungeness in South Puget Sound and Hood Canal? I don't know about that. Jonathan, do you know?
I have no answers there too. Yeah, that's a really good question. No, we can send that one on to the crab experts at Sea Grant and see if what they think about that. But yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for your appreciation, Steve Tuckerman.
Yeah. And then Laura, why more studies on Dungeness crab than rock? Yep, it's commercial reasons. The recreational and commercial crabbing, it's a giant business. And one of the reasons why European green crabs kind of got highlighted and spotlighted by the Washington State Legislature is the crab fishermen are really worried about their livelihood.
Tabitha, is Saltwater Beach one of the locations you're going to be at? No.
Unfortunately, no, I won't be at Saltwater, though I have in the past. But if you guys need a guide printed, I did just put them in the chat too to make it a little bit easier than grabbing them from the website. So you could download them from the chat if that's helpful. Or if somebody really wants one sent to them, I'm like, we could probably, mail you one, but won't get there in 2 days.
And then Linda's asking, this is a one-time search on Thursday, 20 minutes total. We don't want to limit you. If you have the time and want to do multiple searches on Thursday, please, the more the merrier. Do as many as you have time for or beach space for. Sometimes when I'm on the beach, there's a bunch of small ones and I spend the entire time going only 5 or 10 feet down the beach because there's so many to pick up and you have 100 tiny molts to look at after you're done. Or if you're do one search and you're I want to go back and do it again, you get the bug to do it. You can search a different part of the rack line or a little farther down the shoreline or up higher on the shoreline, depending. But yes, you don't have to limit yourself to just one search.
Yeah, we would love to see people doing multiple molt searches, but it's totally flexible, right? Whatever works for you. That could be weekly, could be monthly, it could be a couple times per summer, whatever works for you.
Thank you those that answered that know more about the Hood Canal than I do. So appreciate you answering that question. And then question from Susan, is there any plan on how to eradicate this invasion of green crab? Right now, the only way that Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife is removing green crab from the environment is by trapping. That is the best method. They're looking at different methods in different ways, but there's some massive problems. So like one common question we get is how do, in their native home range, how are the green crab numbers kept in check? And the main way is through a parasite, a barnacle parasite, that kills off the green crab, kind of turns them into crab zombies. And the problem with introducing that one to the Puget Sound is that there's strong evidence that it would also wipe out all the native Dungeness crab. So not a great plan on that part. Right now, trapping is the only way to remove green crab from the environment. Tabitha.
For the saltwater question, I just put it in the chat. It's going to be Emily Greason's beach. So she'll have all the proper materials for you. And if you are near saltwater, that would be a great bio blitz to do with Emily. So that's information's in the chat for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Tabitha. Yeah, Emily is the head of the green crab team and knows more about European green crab than probably almost any other person in the state of Washington. So, Maggie's question. So what if what we find will be quite small? It depends on the beach. Every single time I go out to the beach is different. So sometimes they're really small molts that individuals that have just settled and are growing quickly. And sometimes there's like the large, almost like keeper-sized Dungeness molts. So it totally depends on the beach. But kind of keep in mind when you're looking to not just look for the big crab molts, but also try to find those small ones as well. Kind of readjust your search image. Great questions, everyone. Let's see. Cheryl, any others?
Let's see. Are the tiny live crabs you find under the rocks on Camino Island its own little species of tiny crab, or are they juveniles of a larger crab species? I will say that oftentimes when I find tiny crabs on the beach, they are often those shore crabs. Jonathan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's especially if they're a little higher up on the beach. But I mean, that could be I mean, you could have different sizes of the same species on a beach, or you could have different species that are different sizes. It's just hard to tell. But if you're like higher up in the intertidal, like in the high zone or splash zone, and you see live crabs, they're probably the short crabs. They're this time of year, they're really common in that high splash zone under rocks.
Great. Thanks so much to
Justin,
those who've expressed appreciations. It's lovely.
yeah, thank you all. And then Justin, do we have evidence of other larger species controlling European green crabs through predation, larger crabs, gulls, otters? I have not heard of any direct evidence, but I'm guessing anything that eats crabs, like harbor seals, that prey on Dungeness crab will also go for European green crab as well. The caveat I will say to that is European green crab's primary habitat is in the salt marshes. And so that's kind of where they love to hang out, in those protected muddy bays. And so any species that are there looking for crab species will be quite happy if they come across a green crab population. But I'm sure, I mean, the environment's going to do its thing. Saltwater Beach, Saltwater Park are the same. Yep, the same thing.
Here's a question from Audreyne. Mixon. I'm sorry, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly. Would live green crabs hide under rocks? Yeah, so you would not see them hanging out just up on the high beach. They would be hiding. So they would be probably, still in the water. They tend to be found a lot near pilings, I understand. Jonathan, anything more on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They could hide under the rocks. But if you're walking along the beach looking for molts, the molts will be kind of up and floating with the tide. So that's kind of your primary target when you're doing the search. It is very, very, very unlikely that you would see a live green crab while walking down the beach. But in their own possibility, which is why we're training you all to do this. So, but there's no reason to go like flipping over rocks on the beach to look for live green crabs.
Yeah, we're looking for the molts.
Well, thank you for the questions, everyone. These are fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much for your engagement, your attention. I hope folks will take advantage of the opportunities on the 20th and or this weekend. Try it out. Give it a go. Do a molt search.
Yeah. Yes. If you're walking the beach, might as well collect molts for a little while. So thank you, everyone. It's great to see your faces tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Yep. We have a little bit more time if there are any final questions.
Yep, we'll hang out if there's any other questions.
Yep. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for your kind words.
Yep.
Hope to catch up with you at Semiamu, Cheryl.
Oh, fantastic, Jana. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for all you guys do.
Yeah.
Maggie, if others want to be trained, there is a list of trainings. I think we still have a couple more happening around the Puget Sound if they want to be trained to attend a training. So check the Molt Search site. I can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but the Sea Grants Molt Search site has all of the dates and times if you want to, if others are interested in this.
Yep. And then Richard asks, is it generally best to seek out remote areas that haven't been surveyed before? Yeah, if you have access to a place that you see has not been surveyed on the list, that would be a great place to go do that. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, oftentimes when I'm out at the beach, I'll take a look and open up the map, and there's that interactive map you can look at, and I'll see if there's a search been. If there hasn't been, I'm like, all right, I'll take an extra 20 minutes and do a search here, especially if there's molts on the beach. But Richard, anywhere that you want to search is fantastic.
Anita, yes, you do need to set up an account with a password to use the app. They don't spam you. They don't send. They've never sent me an email for any reason other than to confirm a report that I've submitted.
And you don't need to bring your if you don't have a smartphone or a electrical device, you don't need to bring that to the beach. You could do it, collect all the data on a piece of paper and then bring it back to your computer and enter it into the website as well. So that's a viable alternative if you do not or don't want to bring your phone to the beach. You do need a camera to take a picture of any of the molts that you find. That is key.
Yep. Camera, measuring tool.
Yep.
Jessica, yes.
Jessica, yes, yep, sorry, Cheryl, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, Jonathan.
I was gonna say, yes, we will send out this recording for you all to view. We have your email addresses when you registered for this training, so we'll send the link for the recording to those email addresses you sent us. And the multimeter that comes out monthly to quarterly if you were interested in hearing about that.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, Tabitha, thanks for joining and helping.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank
Hope you have a great time on the beach the next week.
Thank you. We're gonna add on a couple of molts to our low tides with the state parks too, and get our volunteers out there. So hopefully if people are still looking, we'll have the materials for them. And
Great.
we're actually doing a trivia tomorrow night on Camino for a marine theme. So it's gonna be a fun, different wise. I'm like, oh, I should add, what are the front claws of a crab called?
Scientific term. That's a great trivia question. Yes.
It might sneak its way into there. So thank you both, and I appreciate all of your hard work.
Yeah.
Back at you. Good to see you.
Okay.
See you. All right, Jonathan.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
Yeah, had a fantastic turnout. All of our early fears were washed away with the tide. So,
All right.
all right. Have a
Enjoy the rest
wonderful
of your
evening.
evening. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.